A year in America's national parks is a lesson in geography, weather, and time itself. The same country can offer snowbound silence, desert wildflower explosions, hurricane-season surf, and the crisp gold of alpine autumn, all within 12 months. If you're planning one standout park per month, the smartest approach is to travel with the seasons, choosing places when their signature landscapes are most accessible and most alive. January belongs to Everglades National Park in Florida, when the subtropics finally feel breathable. Winter is the park's dry season, which means fewer mosquitoes, clearer skies, and concentrated wildlife. The Everglades is not a swamp in the usual sense. It's a slow-moving river of grass, a broad sheet of water sliding south across limestone. In January, wading birds gather in the shallows, great egrets, herons, roseate spoonbills, taking advantage of shrinking pools that make fishing easier. The human story here is just as layered. The park was established in 1947 after a rare coalition of conservationists, including landscape architect Ernest F. Coe, argued that a place without mountains or geysers still deserved protection. To visit well, pick a focus. Shark Valley for a tram ride and alligator sightings along the canal, the Anhinga Trail near Royal Palm for close-up bird life, or a boat tour from Flamingo to see mangrove islands and maybe a manatee. Bring sun protection even in winter, and remember that distances are deceptive. This is a huge park with few roads. February is ideal for Death Valley National Park in California and Nevada, a place whose name hides its subtlety. This is the largest national park in the contiguous United States, and in late winter it's often at its most welcoming. Cool days, cold nights, and a desert clarity that makes the mountains look carved. Badwater Basin sits 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America, where salt polygons form as brine evaporates and crystallizes. A short drive away, you can climb toward Telescope Peak, rising over 11,000 feet, an elevation swing that explains the park's surprising ecological range. Death Valley's history is full of hard travel and harder economics. The 1849 emigrants who gave it its grim name, the Borax era and the famous 20-mule teams, and the improbable oasis of Scotty's Castle, a 1920s mansion built amid a myth of gold. For visitors, February is the time to hike Golden Canyon, watch sunrise at Zabriskie Point, or walk the Mesquite Flat sand dunes without heat shimmering off the ground. Carry far more water than you think you'll need. The desert doesn't negotiate. March points west to Joshua Tree National Park in Southern California, where two desert ecosystems meet. The Mojave, higher and cooler, and the lower Colorado Desert. That boundary is why the landscape feels like a botany exhibit curated by geology. Joshua trees, actually a type of yucca, appear in the Mojave zone, while Ocotillo and Cholla lean into the warmer expanses below. March often brings comfortable temperatures and, in good rainfall years, early wildflowers. The park's granite piles are a magnet for climbers. Their rounded forms were shaped underground and later exposed, leaving a playground of cracks and boulders. There's cultural history, too. Indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla and Serrano, have long ties to this region, and the park's more recent story includes ranching, mining, and the desert's role as a mid-century refuge for artists and seekers. For a first visit, combine Keys View for a sweeping look over the Coachella Valley, Hidden Valley for classic rock formations, and a night under the stars. This is one of the better dark sky regions near a major metro area. Pack layers. The desert can feel like two seasons in one day. April is when Great Smoky Mountains National Park, straddling Tennessee and North Carolina, begins its annual transformation. This is the most visited national park in the United States, not because it's flashy, but because it's generous. accessible roads, a long hiking season, and a biodiversity that rivals far larger wildernesses. Spring arrives as a sequence. First the red buds and serviceberries, then the famous wildflower season, when trillium, bloodroot, and violets spread across coves and creek banks. The Smokies are also an Appalachian cultural archive. In Cades Cove, preserved cabins and churches speak to the era of isolated farm communities. Nearby, the park's creation in 1934 involved land purchases and displacement, a complicated story that sits behind today's pastoral views. For visitors, April is perfect for lower elevation hikes like Porter's Creek or the Middle Prong Trail, and for scenic drives before summer traffic peaks. Fog is part of the park's identity. Those smoky mists are natural, born from moisture and the volatile compounds released by dense vegetation. So don't treat cloudy views as a disappointment. They're the landscape breathing. May belongs to Zion National Park in Utah, when spring runoff is often still energizing the Virgin River and the canyon walls glow in long, mild evenings. Zion's main canyon is a masterpiece of erosion. Navajo sandstone cliffs streaked with desert varnish rising like cathedral architecture. The park's human history is older than its name. Indigenous peoples lived here for thousands of years, and Mormon settlers arrived in the 1860s, naming the canyon Zion as a spiritual refuge. May is a sweet spot, warm but not brutal, with shuttle service operating and trails generally open. Walk the Riverside Walk for an easy introduction to the canyon's scale, then climb to Scout Lookout for a commanding view. If you're considering the Narrows, check flow rates. High water can close the route, and safe travel depends on conditions. Zion rewards patience. Start early, pause often, and let the canyon's verticality reset your sense of distance. June is a natural match for Glacier National Park in Montana, a park shaped by ice and defined by change. The name is both literal and poignant. Glaciers carved these valleys, and the remaining ice is shrinking. Going to the Sun Road, an engineering triumph completed in 1933, crosses the Continental Divide at Logan Pass and offers one of North America's most dramatic drives, though opening dates vary with snowpack. June is a transitional month. Lower trails may be clear while higher country still holds winter. That contrast is part of the appeal. Waterfalls run full, meadows begin to green, and wildlife becomes active along the edges of melting snow. Glacier is also intertwined with the Blackfeet Nation and other indigenous communities whose homelands border the park. The mountains are not just scenery, but storied places. Travel tip: plan around road and trail status and expect limited services in early season. If you can, take a ranger program. Glacier's geology and ecology are best appreciated with a guide who can translate what you're seeing. July calls for Olympic National Park in Washington, a rare park that contains 3 distinct worlds: glacier-capped mountains, temperate rainforest, and wild Pacific coastline. Summer offers the best access to high country and the most reliable weather for coastal exploration. In the Hoh rainforest, moss drapes bigleaf maples and Sitka spruce rise like pillars, nourished by enormous rainfall that supports an ecosystem more reminiscent of ancient forests than typical American woodland. Up in the Olympic Mountains, Hurricane Ridge provides sweeping views and summer wildflowers, while the coast, places like Rialto Beach and Ruby Beach, delivers sea stacks, tide pools, and sunsets that feel almost theatrical. Olympic's human history includes the Klallam, Quinault, Hoh, and Quileute peoples, whose relationships with these lands and waters continue today. Tides matter here. Consult tide charts before walking far along beaches and treat the ocean with respect. Waves and drift logs can be dangerous. In July, the park shows off its full range, and the challenge is simply choosing which version of Olympic you want each day. August is prime time for Yellowstone National Park, mostly because the high elevations and broad plateaus make summer the easiest season for full access. Yellowstone, established in 1872, is often called the world's first national park, and it still feels like a bold experiment, protecting an active volcanic landscape for public benefit. The park sits atop a massive caldera, and its geothermal features, Old Faithful, Grand Prismatic Spring, Mammoth Hot Springs, are surface expressions of heat and chemistry. The colors in the hot springs come from thermophiles, microorganisms adapted to extremes, turning scalding water into living pallets. August also brings reliable road conditions and long days for exploring the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, where the river drops over waterfalls into a gorge of yellow and rust-colored rock. Wildlife watching is a major draw. Bison herds, elk, and with luck and distance, wolves and bears. Keep your distance. Yellowstone's animals are not props, and plan for crowds by starting early and using less traveled areas like the Lamar Valley for dawn viewing. The park's scale rewards a multi-day approach. Rushing Yellowstone is like skimming a textbook and calling it mastery. September fits Acadia National Park in Maine, when coastal air turns crisp and crowds thin after summer. Acadia is a park of granite and ocean, shaped by glaciers and tides, where mountains meet the Atlantic in compact, walkable drama. Cadillac Mountain is famous for sunrise views, though reservations may be required in peak seasons. Just as memorable are the carriage roads, crushed stone paths funded by John D. Rockefeller, Jr. in the early 20th century, designed for quiet travel through forests and around lakes. Acadia's cultural story includes the Wabanaki peoples and the later conservation movement led by local advocates who donated land to create the park in 1916, making it one of the first national parks east of the Mississippi. September is ideal for biking the carriage roads, hiking the Beehive for a short, steep thrill, or exploring tide pools along the rocky shore. Pack a wind layer. The ocean can cool you fast, even on sunny days. October belongs to Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, when the Blue Ridge ignites with fall color and Skyline Drive becomes a moving overlook of autumn. The park, established in 1935, carries a complicated origin. Communities were displaced during its creation, and the Civilian Conservation Corps left a lasting mark through trails, overlooks, and structures that still define the visitor experience. In October, the hardwood forests, oak, hickory, maple, shift into reds and golds, and the air feels newly carved. Shenandoah is also a park of waterfalls and quiet hollows. Hikes like Dark Hollow Falls or the longer circuit to White Oak Canyon offer a sense of depth beyond the road's vistas. For a memorable day, start with an early drive to catch morning light in the valleys, hike by midday, and end at an overlook as the ridgelines turn purple in the late sun. Weekends can be busy. Weekdays restore the park's contemplative mood. November is a strong month for Big Bend National Park in Texas, when desert heat relaxes and the Chihuahuan Desert becomes friendly to long hikes. Big Bend is remote. Its remoteness is part of its power, and it contains a surprising variety. The Rio Grande carving canyons along the border, broad desert basins studded with ocotillo and sotol, and the forested Chisos Mountains, rising like an island in a sea of arid land. The park's history includes indigenous presence, ranching, and the borderland's constant exchange of culture and commerce. Santa Elena Canyon is a signature site, where limestone walls rise dramatically above the river. The Lost Mine Trail offers mountain views without extreme distance, and in clear November nights, the stars can feel close enough to map by instinct. Plan fuel carefully, carry water, and treat distances with respect. Services are sparse, and the landscape is not forgiving of casual assumptions. December closes the year at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, where winter is less about cold and more about rain, cloud, and the living geology of the Pacific. This park protects two of the world's most famous volcanoes, Kilauea, one of the most active on Earth, and Mauna Loa, the planet's largest volcano by volume. The landscape is young in the most literal sense. Black lava fields, steam vents, and craters that look freshly drawn. The cultural context is essential. For native Hawaiians, these volcanic landscapes are sacred, tied to stories and identities that long predate the park's establishment in 1916. Eruptive activity changes over time, and viewing opportunities depend on current conditions and closures. But even without visible lava, you can walk through the Thurston Lava Tube, drive Chain of Craters Road to see the progression of lava flows, and stand at overlooks that reveal how the island is continually being remade. Bring rain gear and patience. Weather shifts quickly, and volcanic gases can affect air quality. Check alerts before you go and treat the terrain with care. New rock can be sharp, unstable, and deceptively hot. Taken together, these 12 parks form a calendar of American landscapes. Wetlands and deserts, rainforest and geyser basins, Appalachian coves and volcanic craters. Traveling this way turns the year into a guided tour by climate and geology. And it also teaches a quieter lesson. The national parks are not static monuments. They are living places, shaped by water, fire, ice, and human choices, past and present. If you visit with that in mind, each month becomes more than a trip. It becomes a chapter in the ongoing story of the land.